Welcome to the 106th episode of the 1871 podcast. And as it's our 106th episode, we thought what we'd do is look back on Reading's record-breaking 106 season. And I think this was Johnny's idea. So thanks, Johnny.
I do come up with some occasionally.
Yeah, I can't remember, but we were sort of thinking, what should we do for the 100th episode? What should we do for the 106 episode? And it was kind of an easy decision, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So that's what we'll be talking about on tonight's episode. And then on Sunday, it's the 40th anniversary of the announcement of the proposed merger with Oxford United. So what we're going to do on Sunday's episode, we'll discuss what happened back in April 1983 and how the merger was blocked. And that episode will be available anytime from 10 a.m. on Sunday. So on tonight's episode, 106th 1871 podcast episode, our focus, as I said, is on the 106 season. And we have also got a prize to give away. So we've got a little competition. We've got a prize to give away. So the prize is a copy of the Reading Between the Lines book. And that is a book about Reading's first season in the Premier League, which was written by my brother, Stuart Roach, another Reading fan. So we're giving away a copy of that book, and it will be signed by Dave Kitson. So what you need to do, I think Becky's going to be entering that one of our fans tonight. So to be in with a chance of winning a copy of that book signed by Dave Kitson, just send us a direct message on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. And as I say, send a direct message rather than just post it, because then you might give away the answer. So send us a direct message on Twitter, Instagram, or on Facebook. And what you can do is you can look in any of the Reading fan groups in Facebook. We very often post on there. So I post on there, Mark Roach, and you can send me a message on Facebook if you want to, or Twitter or Instagram at 1871 podcast. So the question is, to be in with a chance of winning a copy of that book signed by Dave Kitson, can you tell us who Reading's top scorer was in the 106 season? So that's a question to win a copy of the Reading Between the Lines book about Reading's first season in the Premier League, which is signed by Dave Kitson. Just send us a direct message on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook and tell us who was Reading's top scorer in the 106 season. So that's our prize to sort of commemorate the 106 season, even though the book's about the following season in the Premier League, but it's signed by Dave Kitson. So, and that's what we're going to be talking about on tonight's episode, the 106 season. And we're joined by our 1871 podcast co-host, and also now BBC Radio Berkshire's go-to person on major events at Reading FC. It's Johnny Hunt. Hello, Johnny.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Thanks for that, Mark. That's quite entertaining.
That's okay. So you've been you started to become a regular on BBC Radio Berkshire, haven't you, Johnny? Talking about the points deduction, Paul Ince getting sacked, etc. So I'm expecting more of the same. And
no pressure.
And you've been giving us a couple of nice plugs for the 1871 podcast. So well done for that. And we're also joined by three Reading fans who will be talking about their memories of the 106 season. So a warm welcome to Phil Warner, Becky Mullaney. Is it Becky?
Yeah.
Okay. So welcome to Becky, and also welcome to John Keane. And thank you to all three of you for joining us. And a couple of you with your Reading shirts on as well. So that's great. So and also, just to let you know, we've recently had Steve Coppell and Marcus Hanneman on as guests. They were talking about the 106 season, and those episodes are still available to listen to, or you can watch them on YouTube. So let's get started talking about the 106 season in 2005-2006. Undoubtedly one of the greatest seasons in Reading's history, and arguably the greatest ever season in Reading's history. But let's start, before we talk about your memories of that season, let's talk about Burnley. Are they going to break the record? I'll start. My answer is really simple. No, Reading might stop them tomorrow. But let's sort of come to you. So, firstly, Johnny, what do you think?
It's a no from me as well.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Phil, how about you?
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried. I think they've still got. I think they've still got to play what, three of the bottom six or something like that. Yeah, I guess those teams will be fighting for their lives, though, won't they? So I'm going to say no. Just
Okay. Well, look, I think so. My opinion, and I'm going to ask you, Becky and John, as well. My opinion is that they've got 6 games left. They can get, I think it's 108 points. They've got 90 at the moment, so they can get to 108. And they've got to win all 6 games, including tomorrow's game against Reading, by the way, to beat the record. If they draw, any of those 6 games, they can only equal the record. And if they lose one of those games or draw 2, then they can't break the record. So fingers crossed. I don't think they're going to do it. But Becky, come to you now. What do you think?
No. I think again, like I'm hoping Reading will win. Because we don't want to lose. That points record. Things are bad enough as it is, and that it would be great to hopefully get a win. And like you say, they've got a lot of struggling teams that they're playing against too that are fighting to stay up. So as good as they're playing, I can't see them winning all 6.
Well, I think they've won. They've played the last 4 away games. They've drawn 2 of those games, and they drew 0-0 with Blackpool last month. So
yeah,
I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to. I think they might win kind of 3 or 4 of their last 6 games, but I don't think they'll be breaking the record. And come to you, John. Now, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not going to say absolutely they're not going to, but I think once they've clinched the championship, it's inevitable the motivation is going to die down a bit. The records like this are for the fans rather than the players, so they'll go down a notch. It may not be us that stops them, unfortunately, but I think somebody will.
Well, the other thing is, I think we've also got a chance tomorrow of stopping them clinching the championship, because I think it's something like if they beat Reading tomorrow and Sheffield United don't win and they're playing Cardiff, I think, tomorrow, then they would clinch the championship. So it'd be nice to stop them doing that. And look, it'd be nice if Reading got a point or all 3 points anyway, as we know. So never mind the record. Let's get at least a point tomorrow. That would be good. So look, let's talk about our memories of the 106 season. What a season. I think as myself and Johnny, and I know John, and I don't know yet, Phil and Becky, how long you've been fans, but I do want to ask you about that. But going back and myself and Johnny remembering, the Reading, the record-breaking Roars in the 80s, the Mark McGee team in the 90s. We've got our favourite teams, but I mean, whoever saw that coming to win the championship like that and to break the record. But in terms of introductions, let's start with you, John. Just sort of tell us a little bit about yourself as a Reading fan, how far you go back as a Reading fan, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was a glory hunter when we were going up from the 4th division in 1976. I came along for a 1-1 draw when we were 3rd in the table playing Lincoln, who were running away with it. And I just kept going basically from there. So there were some depressing times in the late 70s, early 80s, but it's just the as you say, who would have thought of it? It's the sort of season that you don't even imagine would be possible ever.
Yeah, and Becky, how about you? How long have you been a Reading fan for?
Well, I actually have followed them pretty much my whole life. I was actually brought up in Swindon.
No.
I remember the season that I only used to live around the corner from the county ground, and I just remember getting quite a lot of abuse from locals at the time. Getting the train to Reading to watch on the terraces of Elm Park. And yeah, what a difference, looking back at 106 points how Swindon were then and even now. So yeah, I followed him for a long time.
And Becky, the obvious question is, if you grew up next to Swindon's ground, how come you became a Reading fan?
My family are all from Reading, so I'm the only one that was born in Swindon.
Good choice, good choice. So Phil, coming to you now, how about you? How long do you go back as a Reading fan?
I kind of just missed the Simod. Unfortunately, I was a little bit too young, so I kind of from about 88, 89, I went along with my dad, sort of sporadically, and then when I was old enough to go into Reading on my own with the train, when I was 15, I got a season ticket, and I've had one since then. So since '95, basically.
Yeah. And let's sort of take ourselves back in a time machine to the start of the 106 season now. And the previous season, Reading had finished 7th in the Championship, and that was 2 or 3 years after that Jamie Curitan goal, wasn't it? Coming up, getting promotion on the last day against Brentford. Fantastic time to be a Reading fan that season. And then moving forward, we've just finished 7th. Just wanted to ask you, Johnny, what were your expectations at the start of the 106 season? Obviously, we didn't know it was going to be called that at that point, of course. But at the start of the 2005-2006 season, having finished 7th the previous season, what were you kind of expecting, hoping for, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I was living in Australia at the time, so I remember watching following the first game, the Plymouth game. I was actually following the Ashes, 2005 Ashes at the same time, and England were doing well in that. And then the game, I was following the game, and it was like 2-1. It was like, oh, here we go again, another season of hope gone down the toilet after one game. But I didn't. I think realistically, I was like, after would be there or thereabouts. I'd hope for maybe a playoff place, around the top 8, because we'd had a decent kind of squad and we've been sort of around that, for a few seasons. But I didn't have any hope or expectation that what will happen.
Yeah, I'm going to come to Becky now, because Becky's kindly joined us on a work break, so Becky's time's limited. So kind of want to give you the floor a little bit now, Becky. Obviously, at the start of every season, I think every fan is optimistic.
Yeah.
And as Johnny said, that first game didn't go well. But before the start of the season, having finished 7th the previous season, what were your hopes and expectations for that 2005-2006 season?
I was sort of expecting playoffs at best, to be honest. I was never expecting us to do that well. And like I said at the start of the season, that loss to Plymouth. I remember I was doing my A-levels at the time. And I actually moved again. I then moved to Nottingham. So I had a lot of Forest fans. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think they were in League One at the time. And yeah, so a lot of difference. But no, I wasn't expecting us to do that well. But obviously, when we started picking up the wins, yeah, it was just great.
Becky, you're going to tell us next that you've also lived in Oxford, Aldershot.
No, I haven't. Thankfully not.
But Becky, I know you're limited in time, but I'm going to try to do this in order, really. So I'll come to you, Phil, next. How about you? How about your expectations for the 2005-06 season?
I pretty much the same as Becky, playoff at best, but wasn't really sure. We'd lost a few, certainly in the attack, we'd lost quite a few players. We lost Forster and Owusu, and we weren't quite sure about some of the players that had come in yet, were we? Because they were fairly unknown. So yeah, I wasn't sure, basically.
And John, same question to you, really.
Yeah, really, I was more interested in the second half of the season, because for the 4 or 5 years beforehand, we'd always done really well. We're really in contention Christmas, January, and then just faded away. So I hope that we'd actually carry it on through. So I was thinking in contention or around the playoffs, but just I'm slightly worried about the lack of players and the fact that we were signing unknown teenagers from Cork City.
Yeah, and this is a common theme for Reading fans over the years, isn't it? And you refer back to the 70s and the ups and downs, and it wasn't just in the 70s. There's been ups and downs all the way through as Reading fans, obviously including relegations and the Simod Cup season. You mentioned that, Phil, and Reading got relegated that season, didn't they? So there has been, it's fair to say, ups and downs, but plenty of ups, and this is one of the the greatest seasons in Reading's history. And Becky, conscious that you haven't got too long with us now, I'll just sort of ask you if you can to recall, your memories and how you were feeling as the season progressed, and then when did you think, oh, actually, it might not just be playoffs, we might actually go up automatically. What were your thoughts about that?
Yeah, just like you say, the more games we were winning, I'm like, can this actually happen? Like, I can't believe it. And then I just there was a bit of like, not negativity, but there was just a bit of doubt in my mind that we're just gonna slip up towards the end. But then obviously we didn't. And then I just remember going Leicester away and getting that 1-1 draw, and clinching promotion. And then obviously you had the 5-0 win at home to Derby. So yeah, it was amazing. Like, especially as well living in a place like Nottingham, where Nottingham Forest fans like to think that they were one of the top teams. Yeah, so
you had plenty of bragging rights that
yeah.
in general, didn't you? And Becky, just to ask you, because I think you've only got a few minutes left before you need to get back to work. So thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What asked about your thoughts before the start of the season, but that first game, I think Johnny mentioned it earlier. Obviously, can you imagine that we were going to go on and do what we did after that first game? What were your thoughts? That first game of the season, it's a defeat. Is it almost, not that much optimism at that point about what we could achieve that season?
I guess the first game of the season, you just never know, really, because it's the first game, so anyone could lose the first game. But yeah, I would never have expected to get promoted on record points, losing the first game in the season. But I wasn't like particularly optimistic as doing as well as we did. But I wasn't thinking that we'd struggle, though. No.
Yeah, and just to say, Johnny's on childcare duty today, so I think we can hear Johnny's daughter in the background. There you go. So what's your daughter's name, Johnny?
Edie Rose.
And how old's Edie Rose?
3.
Yeah. So look, we've got to say goodbye to Becky. Becky's got to get back to work. Thank you for joining us, Becky. And
see you, Becky.
Your Reading shirt for the rest of the day at work.
I'm allowed. I work from home on a Friday, so it's
okay, fair enough. Well, thanks for joining us, Becky. Great to speak to you.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Right.
So we'll come back to Johnny, to Phil, to John, and maybe even Edie Rose has got something to say. So Phil, come to you now. After that first game, obviously things started to improve. Let's look back at the first few games of that season. So I've got some notes here in front of me, and as the season progressed, obviously we had the defeat, and it was obviously at home to Plymouth, and I think Leroy Lita scored, didn't he? Got the equaliser in the second half, and I think, was it Luke Chadwick who got the winner for Plymouth? Was it Luke Chadwick? Johnny, can you remember?
Yeah, it was.
He got a last-minute winner, didn't he?
Yeah.
So, but then we went to Brighton, we had 2 away games, Brighton away, Preston away, and we won 2-0 and we won 3-0. So, Phil, coming to you now. After those first 2 wins of the season, both away, both clean sheets, and 5 goals across those 2 games, and you had Glenn Little, Dave Kitson scored the 2 goals at Brighton, and then Leroy Lita got 2 goals. Glenn Little scored again against Preston. What were you feeling then? Were you sort of feeling quite optimistic that this could be a good season?
Yeah, definitely. After that defeat, as you say, it was really important that we bounced back with something. And then two wins for 2 clean sheets, particularly to go to Preston. I think they're both big wins, but I think at Preston were sort of always sort of thereabouts for the playoffs themselves at the time. So that was brilliant. And obviously for Leroy Lita to get a couple more goals. Did he score on the first day? I think he did, didn't he?
Yeah, scored the equaliser against Plymouth in the second half on the first day.
So for sort of him to get 2 more on the board as well as the new signing, yeah, things are looking good.
Yeah. John, same question to you really. After those 2 away wins, what were you thinking about the rest of the season at that point?
To be honest, that Plymouth game, I came away from that thinking, how in God's name did we lose that? Because we deserved to win and to win comfortably. So I was fairly optimistic. And then Preston away, I was thinking, hang on, there's something special about to happen here, because that was a sort of coordinated, fast-flowing performance that you didn't expect from Reading, and it was just something different. And I had the first inklings that there might be something special. I mean, Glenn Little scored with a header, for instance.
Yeah,
but it was just, clearly something was about to happen. I definitely thought that at the time.
Was it? Do you think that was something to do with a bit of momentum building and a bit of belief building? Because, like you say, yes, it was a defeat. I mean, the statistics show that Reading lost their first game, but there was some good signs, really. Although it was at home and it was a defeat and it was the first game and everyone's feeling a bit deflated. Actually, there was some encouraging signs, weren't they? And Leroy Lita scored in the first game, and it was a late goal. Obviously, Reading fans have experienced that on many occasions, and the last game very similar. But it was kind of different back then, wasn't it? There was some optimistic signs even in that first game, I think. John.
That was definitely, and the the Brighton game as well. I mean, I'm going to throw in a cheeky plug if I can, because I don't know if that shows. Oh, there we go. So the book I wrote about this season and the following 2 seasons. I was lucky enough to get to interview some of the people involved, and Wally Downs was a revelation, for instance. And he said that before the Brighton match, Steve Coppell just left them with the team, and him and Kevin Dillon really laid the law down on how important it was to bounce back from Plymouth. So I think it was expletive led, but the team really got it in the neck at that point.
And I think we've got to, at this point, it's probably quite a good point to mention, Alan Pardew and Martin Allen as well, because it was it was similar. They sort of they laid the foundations, if you like, for Steve Coppell and Wally Downs, and you had that contrast with Steve Coppell, very calm. Wally Downs, had that punch up with Neil Warnock, didn't he? And those sort of combinations quite often work quite well, and obviously worked really, really well that season. But John, I just want to, come back to you. You mentioned about your book there. So tell us about a little bit about the book. How can people buy it?
And of course, yes, yeah. So it's the sum of the parts, the evolution of the perfect team. It's basically available on Amazon, and all good booksellers. They're good booksellers because they stock it, and there probably aren't that many. But Amazon is the best bet. Basically, I wrote it for the 10th anniversary of this season. When I realised that there were Reading fans who hadn't been there. And it was such a fantastic time. I wanted to capture not just what had happened and how it had happened, but what it was like to be a fan there. So I've got a variety of fans giving their memories of various points of the season.
And it's called the sum of the parts.
The sum of the parts, yes.
Yeah.
If I hold it in front of me, that should be readable.
Yeah, so you can, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that. If you're not, then you can't. But it's called The Sum of the Parts, and that's available on Amazon. And it's about, is it about just that season?
No, it's basically, it starts off by, as you said, about Alan Pardew and also John Medeski and the foundations. Then it deals in detail with what happened in that 106 season and then the following 2 seasons. So really, it could be entitled The Rise and Fall of Reading.
Yeah, and I think what that's what we're discussing here really, and it's for I don't think I ever saw Robin Friday play. I'm not sure if I ever saw Steve Death play. I might have done because I did go to some Reading games back in those days, but I didn't sort of really become a proper Reading fan until the mid 80s. But it's always great to hear those stories about players like that. And Johnny, those 2 players I've just mentioned, Johnny's 2 all-time favourite Reading players I know, and I didn't really get to see them, but it's fascinating to hear the stories. So like you say, a lot of Reading fans do remember the 106 season, but some of course weren't even born back then. It was a long time ago. What we're talking 17 years ago, isn't it? The 106 season now.
And the scary thing is it's 25 years since we left Elm Park.
Yes,
a quarter of a century.
Anyway, you're making us all feel a bit old now.
Yeah.
I imagine that not so much Phil and Johnny, but certainly myself and you, John. We go back a bit further than Johnny, I think, don't we? So look, come to you, Phil. Now, those 2 away games, and then following on from that, back at home. So we've gone 2-0 away to Brighton. 3-0 away to Preston, and then 20th of August 2005, Reading against Millwall at the Medeski Stadium, as it was called back then. 5-0. Bobby Convey put Reading 1-0 up, and then Millwall had a player sent off, so Reading playing for the rest of the game after 23 minutes against 10 men. Bobby Convey scored again, and then James Harper, Dave Kitson, and Steve Sidwell. So there's a pattern emerging here at this stage where you've got Leroy Lita's got 3 goals. Dave Kitson scored against Brighton. Glenn Little scored against Brighton and Preston. And then you've got Bobby Convey, Harper, and Sidwell also on target. 5-0 against Millwall. Okay, it was, against 10 men for a lot of the game. But by that stage, Phil, you must have been feeling pretty confident that this could be a good season for Reading.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, before we sort of start mentioning specific games, that Millwall game for me was the one where I really sat up and thought, hang on, this is better than last year and the year before. I think was that Bobby Convey goal? Was that the one where he ran sort of half the pitch? That was amazing. I remember that moment specifically. But yeah, it was sort of from then, and like you say, the spread of goals. I think I had a look earlier. I think it was about that midfield 4, the 4 regular starters got 29 goals between them in all competitions, and that's just unheard of, isn't it? Just from the midfield. So you kind of knew teams that do well normally spread the goals about. And we were doing that.
Yeah, and Johnny, coming to you now, because obviously you had the Arsenal Invincibles and Reading didn't achieve that, but it was only one more defeat after the first game of the season. So Reading from after the 6th of August until the defeat at Luton on the 17th of February, Reading were unbeaten. What kind of really made you think that actually we could be going up this season, Johnny?
I think the first thing was, that all games a start, but when Doyle scored against Burnley, and it's like, who's this lad? And he just took to it straight away. It wasn't his debut, but I think it was one of his first couple of games. He came in because Kitson was injured, like they were saying, one player got injured, the other one's coming in, and then it was just like a roller, a steamroller, didn't they? You get going. Oh, it's this game, win again, and went to some tough places as well. Just going through them, reminding me of some of the games. Palace game, I think where it was we were losing, come back and win. Every time they were put under a challenge, they responded. Late equaliser in a couple of games, I think later on in the season. I think they went, I remember, because again, living over in Oz, a lot of the games went on telly, but the ones that were, I was in Scruffy Murphy's, the pub in Sydney, about 4 a.m, with a few of the Reading fans over there watching. And I remember the Wolves game, I think got a bit lucky, but over the Christmas period we won. And it was amazing, just amazing to see our club doing what they were doing. And Sheffield United, I think, we were fighting out with them for a long time in that season where we were top second, and it was quite close. But then we just kept pulling away. That's what Edie Rose thinks. That's how I think.
Yeah, going to come to you now, Phil. Oh, sorry, Johnny, had you not finished there? Oh, okay. Well, I'll come to Phil now. Phil, obviously, we went on that long unbeaten run after the first game of the season, and the first win was away at Brighton, and then we beat them just before Christmas at home, 5-1. Brighton had a player sent off in that game in the second half, but Dave Kitson got a hat trick in that game. I think it was Noel Hunt got the other goal for Reading. And like Johnny was saying, you had all these players. You had Dave Kitson, Lita, Kevin Doyle, and the midfield chipping in as well. And when it sort of gets to December and you're winning, I think we won something like 11 games in a row or something like that, 11, 12 games in a row. We're at the top end of the table by then. You're thinking we've got a really good chance of actually going up automatically at that point, I guess.
Yes, so definitely. And actually, it seems strange to be worried about losing a game at this point, but because it probably wouldn't have made a massive impact, but then it might have done. So I was thinking about the New Year's Eve game against Derby, when we were 2-1 down. I wasn't at that game, but I remember being away and just having the score, the video printer on, or whatever it was at the time, and just sort of really hoping for a goal. And then Shane Long's name came up, and you thought, wow, so that's good for him, but good for us, because who knows, if we'd have lost that game, I don't see the season going completely pear-shaped, but I could have knocked a bit of confidence out some of the players. I don't know. We might have been fine, but it just kept the momentum going, didn't it? And how important that goal was for us and for Shane Long as well.
Yeah, and I think it was. I've just been, as you're talking there, I've been counting them up, and after we drew in October, we drew at home to Leeds 1-1, and then I think it was 10 games in a row after that. And you mentioned that Derby game, but there was 5-1 at home to Brighton, 5-1 at home to Cardiff, 4-0 at home to Norwich, and then we won in February. We won 4-3 against Crewe. And John, just coming back to you now, when did you think that this is looking really good for Reading to go up? Because we're not even kind of talking about points records at this point, but it was by this stage you're thinking Reading are favourites to go up automatically.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange because as Johnny mentioned, we were head to head with Sheffield United, and we didn't go top until I think it was last week of October, first week in November, something like that. And then they faded slightly, and we put our foot on the gas. But for me, the crucial game was Wolves away on Boxing Day. I remember Christmas is out the way. We always have a good first half of the season. Now second half of the season, winter's here. This is the time for banana skins, and everybody went there thinking this was a crunch match. And Wolves fans were Wolves were doing quite well. They were giving it the big one, and we went there, and it was just a phenomenal performance. And that dribble and goal from Glenn Little is still something that lives in the memory. So that was really when they proved the doubters, and I thought, okay, it's going to happen this year.
Yeah, and look, if you go back to the end of November 2005, couple of away games at Ipswich and Plymouth, 3-0 at Ipswich, 2-0 at Plymouth, 3-0 at home to Luton, 5-1 at home to Brighton, 2-0 away to Millwall, 2-0 away to Wolves, 2-0 home to Leicester, and then we drew that game against Derby, and then you had the 5-1 win against Cardiff, 4-0 against Norwich at the end of January. Phil, coming back to you now, I mean, when did you think this is going to happen? We're going to go up automatically?
It's sort of natural not to ever think that as a Reading fan, I think, until you're literally there. I think probably for me, looking at that, if I can go just into February, that draw at Sheffield United, just because they were the main challengers, and not losing there, for me, kind of, yeah. I remember I'd had an operation on my knee, and my friend had to drive because I was on crutches. I remember everyone standing up and celebrating when we equalised, and I had to sort of sit there with my crutches in the air, trying to join in. But I think, yeah, probably from about then, I thought actually this could actually happen. But even then, as a Reading fan, you think, I could lose all of them now, couldn't I? Still.
Yeah, and you know that Sheffield United game, Dave Kitson got the 2 early goals, so Sheffield United scored first, and then Dave Kitson got the equaliser early in the first half, and that was, that was Reading unbeaten from after the first game of the season, and now we're into mid-February, and Reading are winning most of the games and they're unbeaten, and then you have that game against Luton. Kevin Doyle put us in front in the first minute, and then he scored again right at the end, but it was a 3-2 defeat against away to Luton. But then we bounced back, a couple of wins at the end of February and then into March. So we won 2-1 at home to Preston, and then 3-0 away to Burnley. And I think by that stage, Johnny, come back to you now. When did you think this is going to happen? We're going to go up automatically.
I think when we got the draw at Leicester, being a Reading fan, that's us, isn't it? We never actually get too carried away. I remember watching the Luton game with some friends, and that was on live over in Oz, and I was like, yeah, come and watch the team, because and then we lose. I was going, that's typical. But it was like, you kind of didn't panic, because you knew that they bounced back, and every challenge, the team was just unreal. And I think one of the iconic ones was Glenn Little's goal against Plymouth. I mean, that was just sublime, wasn't it? As a finish, and it was just amazing to see. Even in that Sheffield United game, I think we could have won. I think Kitson missed a penalty in the draw away, I think, didn't he? So we could have had even more than 106 points. But it was just. I used to think, as a fan, you just kept going. Oh, every challenge we've dealt with, and taking it on, and we're still improving. And the gap, we was definitely going to get promoted. Then it was like, all right, when are we going to be champions? And that was just kind of counting it down. As the gap was getting wider. I can't remember the exact points difference between us and third, but for a long way, you're kind of going, we really must have to literally completely stuff this up to go promoted.
Yeah, and John, I want to come back to you now, because you go into March, and I don't know if you remember back to the season where the Jamie Cureton goal at Brentford took us up into what is now the Championship. I think Reading had a load of draws, didn't they? Couldn't seem to win a game.
Yeah,
and this was sort of a mini version of that, because we won 3-0 away to Burnley at the beginning of March, and then it was a couple of draws in a row: 0-0 home to Watford, 1-1 home to Wolves, and then you had that game at Leicester. And what do you remember about that game? Because we were losing 1-0, on the brink of getting promoted to the Premier League, and then Kevin Doyle scores a late goal at the equaliser. Yeah, what were the sort of feelings and the thoughts and the emotions?
To be honest, I know a few people who didn't bother to go to that game. because it was only a particular set of results that would see us go up that day. So people were thinking it's not going to happen now, it's going to be a week or so later, but I went for it, and it was just, you know, one of those memories that lives with you forever. That day was just really special. I think people knew it was going to happen one day or another, so it didn't matter if it was going to happen that day, but the fact that it looked like it wasn't going to happen, and then we had that header from the corner, and it was just amazing. And there's just so many memories. Give us the blank results while we were waiting to hear, and then coming over the tannoy, congratulations Reading on your promotion. Steve Coppell running across and throwing his coat into the crowd, but it's a measure of the man that he asked Ron Grant for permission if he could throw his coat before he did. Yeah. And just, I mean, one particular memory that I've got that sums it up for me. After the match, and we'd been there for an hour or so, because Leicester were just brilliant in their hospitality and letting us celebrate as long as we liked. We'd parked in a slightly dodgy part of town. We were walking back across a bridge over the river or the canal, and up ahead we saw a gang of about 12, I mean, scroats, basically, the young teenagers, clearly out for trouble, and we were all in high spirits in the hoops, and we were walking along, and just as we got to them, they stood in two ranks and applauded us through. And I thought, my God, this is just something quite amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. And Phil, how about you? Your memories of that game? But were you there? Did you go to that game?
Yeah, I did. Like John was saying, I kind of tried to work it out a few weeks in advance, kind of when we might do it. And so, based on my calculation, I thought we'd do it at Leicester. Weirdly, I don't know how I worked that out, because we drew the 2 games before. But so some friends of mine didn't get tickets because they left it too late. But yeah, like John said, it was that wait at the end. We knew we'd got a point, but it was that wait for the results. Most of the Leicester fans had gone. I know some stayed and sort of applauded, but it was that wait of, do we get excited? It's strange because we knew we were basically going to do it at some point, but and then when it came through, it's just because I think Carlos Sava was involved as well, wasn't he? One of the results that John will know more, you guys will know more than me probably, but yeah, it was amazing. And just on the way out, I remember my phone going berserk with friends, text messages from friends, who supported bigger clubs, kind of saying, welcome to the Premier League, I will see you next season. That's just so surreal. Unfortunately, I had to drive that day, so I couldn't get a drink till I got home. But yeah, it was great. Brilliant.
Well, Johnny, come back to you now. And, what were you watching that game in Australia? Did you get to see it, or were you back in England by then?
No, I was still living over there. I was listening. I think it was called Reading World on the old audio thing about 4 o'clock in the morning, I think, in my house where I was, and we were 1-0 down, and I was going, oh, come on, please, not now. And then when Doyle scored, it was just, I think I probably woke up after Sydney that time, because I got excited, as you do as Reading fans. And then that was just unbelievable. A bit early to start celebrating, but later on that day, I certainly enjoyed celebrations with our massive, about 4 Reading fans that were living in Sydney at the time.
So the Sydney Reading fan club, was it?
That's it, absolutely.
So look, Johnny, we're talking about the 106 season and the record, but of course the main thing about that season was it was promotion to the Premier League for the first time in the club's history. When you kind of think about the enormity of that, what that means, and what Sir John Medeski did, and Roger Smee before him, and Alan Pardew, and all those people that helped us to get there, and finally, Steve Coppell has taken us up into the Premier Division with players like Kevin Doyle, who've been signed from Cork City, and all that sort of thing. What did that mean to you as a Reading fan we're now confirmed we're in the Premier League?
I think it's special for me because none of my family had ever seen us get that high before. My dad, blessed before he passed, and my granddad. We were a lower league team and sometimes a very poor one. So for me, it was like huge. It was like, wow, we're there. And I don't think, the reality and sort of the other lads, like you kind of go, geez, we're in the big time. Little old Reading, because that's what little Reading that nobody expected ever to get there, to be honest, and to get there not by luck or by scraping in the playoffs, but to actually go out and absolutely nail the league on top of it and get the points record. It was like, what the heck? Nobody in football would have guessed that, let alone Reading fans. And that was unbelievable, and it just was a special time. Even though I made it to the last game of the season, but I think for everyone that was involved at the club, whether you went to the games or not, it was just the most enjoyable moment, I think, up to then that you've ever had as a fan.
And John, coming back to you now, because this is the first time that you're going to see Reading play in the Premier League. You've seen them play, going back to the 70s in every division apart from the Premier League, and it's finally happened. How did that make you feel as a Reading fan?
I mean, to be honest, it took weeks to get my head around it. It was absolute sheer disbelief. It was something that you didn't think would happen. And to be honest, right up until the QPR match, I was convinced that something was going to sabotage it. We've had the pandemic now, and it didn't stop the matches. But at the time, there was the threat of bird flu on the horizon. I was thinking, okay, they're going to get to one match before the end. There's going to be a bird flu epidemic, and that they'll scrap the league. That was, I was convinced something like that was going to come up and screw it. But I mean, really, I'll sum it up with the words I said a year later, walking away from the Blackburn match at the end of the first Premier League season. I was thinking, we might as well stop watching now. It's never going to get any better than this. That was the absolute high point. It was just that those two seasons together were just indescribable. You could never have predicted them.
Yeah, and Phil, asked you the same question, really. What it meant to you, obviously, as a Reading fan. I think since the late, end of the 80s, early 90s. Obviously, we had that great team under Mark McGee. We had the team with the Jamie Curtin goal. Alan Pardew, what he did, and now this. We're finally in the Premier League. What did that mean to you?
Yeah, there's definitely a tear in my eyes at Leicester, which in some ways is a bit embarrassing, but it's a culmination of years of sort of hope and worry and just longing to see that your local, your home team in the Premier League. And after '95, when we lost at Wembley, I think most of us probably thought that's the nearest we were going to get. Especially after 2-3 years after that, it just went sort of downhill, didn't it? Yeah, just surreal. I think, like John was saying, it probably wasn't until the fixture list came out, or the sticker albums came out, and you started thinking, we're amongst these big names now, and we belong there, and we proved that we belong there the next season, didn't we?
Yeah, and Johnny, I come back to you now, and you would forgive Reading for taking their foot off the gas. We're in the Premier League now. Let's go and celebrate. But the next two games, we scored 10 goals. 5-0 at home to Derby, 5-2 away to Cardiff, and we've got 100 points. And there's still, 98 points, I think, at that point, and there's still 4 games to go. We can get to 100 points. We might be able to break the record. We're going to go up as champions. But those next 2 games, 10 goals. I mean, it wasn't. It sort of carried on, didn't it? It was the elation of going up to the Premier League, but it didn't stop. That juggernaut kept going, didn't it? Against Derby, against Cardiff, and okay, we drew against Leeds, but then we finally got the 100 points, and then coming to the end of the season. So the last few games that got us to 103 points before the final game of the season. So we beat, after the Leicester game, we beat Derby at home 5-0. We beat Cardiff 5-2 away. We drew 1-1 at Leeds, and then we beat Stoke 3-1 at home. Drew 1-1 against Sheffield Wednesday, and then we get to that last game of the season. Did you get back for that game, Johnny?
Yeah, no, that was win at all costs. I had to get back. I had to see them that season, and probably still paying for it now, but it was, to be there, to be part of that celebration. I've still got the shirt signed in my wardrobe, and one of my best mates, Rob, that I've been going with for a long time. We went together, and that day, I think for anyone was just an amazing celebration. And the next day, there's a game, I think, wasn't there? A Legends game, I think, on the Sunday at the ground. And the way the day panned out, Bertie's penalty just really put the icing on the cake, didn't it, for the fans, and maybe not so much for Kingsley, bless him, but it was just a big celebration, probably the biggest celebration we've had as Reading fans, that you just go, wow. And then I remember the next day I stayed at the hotel, and then the next morning all the players were coming down, probably about as worse as we were, but and you got to meet them all, and say well done, and wearing Graham Murty's medal, things like that. At the time, it showed you how much the club meant to us, to them, to everyone that was involved. It was like a big family, and that was, geez, I can start crying now, because it was huge. It was a huge thing for us. Well, we've done it, and we're there, and nobody can go, oh, you were lucky, oh, you didn't deserve it. And no excuses. We were the best, and we destroyed everyone, and that was that. And we're gonna milk it, and we're gonna enjoy it for everything.
Yeah, because you don't know what's to come in the Premier League the next season. So obviously it was a magnificent season, but the main thing is to stay up, and we did so much more than that. But you said it there, Johnny. I mean, Reading 106 points, 16 points ahead of Sheffield United, who finished on 90. And, we were, in terms of automatic promotion, Reading obviously finished on 106 points. The third place team, Watford, who got promoted in the playoffs, they finished on 81. So, we're miles in front. We're 16 points ahead of the second place team, Sheffield United. And by the way, in case anyone's wondering why I haven't been talking too much about this, I was similar to Johnny. I wasn't in Australia, but I was out in Dubai, so it was quite difficult. And I think I just wanted to sort of get Johnny's view, to get the view of a few fans, just really to sum up what it meant, because obviously it was fantastic. And I was out there in Dubai, and a bit like I think Phil, you were saying, I had my chart of, how many points do we need to guarantee promotion, and I was updating it every single game, Reading's games, the other games, and I wasn't convinced. And for me, it was all about going up, and the rest of it was just a fantastic bonus. But yeah, I was doing my, Sheffield United can get this much, Watford can get this much, and then gradually Reading were getting closer and closer, and then it's finally we've done it. And then for me, the title is a bonus. The 106, the record, is a bonus. Just getting 100 points would have been a bonus. But for me, it was all about going up to the Premier League. And coming back to you now, John. Yep. When you sort of take time to reflect on that season, not only have we gone up to the Premier League, not only have we won the title, and we finished 16 points ahead of the second place team. Not only did we break the 100-point barrier, but we broke the record. And like Johnny was saying, we were miles better than anyone else. As a Reading fan, do you go, I'm not sure I can quite believe that happened?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much about that season, the second half especially, that was just perfect. One of the things I really love is the way we clinched promotion and the championship. So promotion was away at Leicester, so the hardcore away fans got to witness that, and then in front of a packed crowd at home to Derby the next week, we clinched the championship. So everybody got a celebration, and it wasn't just what we did; it was the way we did it that I really love as well. So I mean, the back four, I've got my stats here, got 7 yellow cards between them all season, not one red card for the whole for the whole team that season. It was just not, you know, we did things in the right way. We didn't kick people. There was no gamesmanship. We did it Steve Coppell's way. You know, he's such a generally perfect, nice man who does things the right way. With him and Mertz as his captain playing the game the same way. He's a thoroughly decent chap. It was just that translated to the whole team. So it's the style we did it in, not just what we did, that I really like.
Yeah, and Phil, how about you? When you look back on that season and what we achieved, you know, what do you think when you sort of look back on that season? And I guess you do that on a fairly regular basis, do you?
Yeah, it's we've only got certain things to look back on, haven't we, as Reading fans? Certain sort of brilliant things to look back on. But yeah, the word perfect, I think, was used earlier by somebody. It's just it was as close to perfect a season and a team as you could get at this level, certainly. And that's why we've got at the moment the record. I was listening to a Burnley fan being interviewed yesterday, and just the way he was talking, it kind of reminded me of how we felt, you know, and how I think knowing that they're coming to Reading tomorrow, it made me feel the dread that most teams must have felt that season when we were coming to them. It was weird having that feeling, but yeah, I don't know if we'll ever repeat it. Right? We won't, will we? We'll never have that season again.
Well, Johnny, come to you now. What do you think it was? What was the key to success? Was there one thing in particular, or was it a combination of elements that contributed to that success? You know, players, management, because it wasn't just, we didn't just get promotion. It was a magical season, wasn't it? And what was the key to all of that, do you think?
I think it was the whole leadership from the top down, from Sir John Majeski down through the management, the background stuff. You know, we had John Fern on here, Ron Grant. You know, it's the unsung heroes. It was that whole team. Everyone was in it together. You know, we talked about the fringe players. You know, like Sabrina Gunnarsson, John Oster, John Halls. You know, everyone chipped in. You know, you didn't hear players complain. You didn't hear players, you know, giving out because they were part of a successful team, and everyone went out there and did what their job was. You know, they enjoyed playing, and you know, the happiness was there in the squad. And obviously, you know, to back that up, the fans, you know, the attitude, and just dug it out of me old. There you go, not washed in 17 years.
Well,
but it's still there. The signatures are holding it together. So that's one of my proudest things to ever have had. And you know, that that was just, you know, it does make you emotional now, because I think, wow, it's still, you know, for all those people that we've spoken to as well, Mark, you know, how much it means to them still. You know, they've gone on to other careers elsewhere or done other things, but for Steve, for Brian, as you know, scouting, and all the players that, you know, they loved it and they loved the club, and that means a lot as a fan, that people still think a lot about our club, even though they've moved on.
And you're right, and we had Marcus Hanneman recently, and that episode's still available. Same with the Steve Coppell episode, and Brian McDermott as well, and we've had Kevin Doyle, Ivar Ingemarson, Graham Murty, Ibrahim Sonko. All of the first series was audio only, but you can still find all of those. Second series is on YouTube as well. So the Steve Coppell episode, the Brian McDermott episode, the Marcus Hanneman episode, they're available to watch on YouTube as well if you want to have a look at those. And when we were talking to Marcus, I really enjoyed that conversation, because it was about him as a person and the impact, the positive impact it had on him as a person in his life, not just football wise. And he said towards the end of that, didn't he? He said, I'm feeling emotional remembering my time at Reading. And this was Marcus Hanneman, and you think he's this, you know, strong goalkeeper who shouts a lot. But actually he was saying, look, this is making me a bit emotional, kind of talking about it and remembering it and all that sort of thing. And John, is it, you know, all the kind of experiences that you've had over the years as a Reading fan, where does the 106 season rank for you?
absolutely top. You know, as I said earlier, I thought it's never ever going to get as good as it has now. You know, we could never have possibly in our wildest dreams imagined that would happen, and the script that was written would have been laughed at if you'd submitted it anywhere. It was just perfect. But talking about the background, I mean, it infected everybody. There was the royals' families, if you remember that, which was the wives and girlfriends doing so much charity work. It just overtook everybody with the same feelings of goodwill, and part of it was that everybody was united. I mean, again, when I was writing the book, I interviewed the performance management consultants, Catalyst, who I think played such a major part in it, and they said that they'd instilled the same attitude across the whole club. And one of the examples that they used was they go to the guy who opened the gate at the training ground. That was his job. He was the gatekeeper, and as far as he was concerned, his job was to help Reading get in the Premier League. Everybody in the whole club was completely united behind the same aim. No egos, no jealousies, just everybody working together. It was just never to be repeated.
Yeah, and Phil, come to you now. What do you think was the secret to the success that season?
Oh, that's a big one. There's a bit of everything, isn't there? I mean, the recruitment. I mean, some of the players there were brought in by Pardew, weren't they? Murty was there from Tommy Burns. Topple added his own. You've had the scouting system that obviously helped. It was kind of a lot of things all coming together at the right time. And you look at a lot of those players that none of the players really went on to have a better career anywhere else, did they? Some of the players had good seasons in the Premier League, but nobody really peaked, I don't think, as much as they did those couple of years at Reading. So there was something about the club, about everything at the time that just it just worked, didn't it?
Yeah, and we haven't really talked too much about individual players, and I think that's probably because we had some brilliant players like the goals, Lita, Kitson, and Doyle, and Shane Long as well, Marcus Hanneman in goal, and I think we had Graham Stack, didn't we, as well, and I think at least one of the guests that we've had on one of the, I think it might have even been Marcus or Steve Coppell, said that people like Graham Stack had an influence on the team. But if you look at the players, from the back line, Nicky Shorey, Graham Murty, Ivar Ingamarson, Ibrahim Osonko, Steve Sidwell, and all the guys in midfield, and then that sort of front three and four with Shane Long as well, they all contributed. It was very much a team effort. It was that team was full of stars, but it worked because it was a team. I mean, Johnny, who do you think there were standout players in that season, or was it everyone really?
I think it was everyone. I think one thing as well, we were lucky with injuries. We didn't really have players out for a long time. I think Kitson was out for a while maybe, or the strikers kind of, but it didn't impact on the team because we had the depth. And then even then we had Shane Long coming in that nobody expected to be probably playing first team football at that stage that season. And they were all heroes. I think everyone that played for that team, you couldn't put one above the other. Because they all did what they did. The defence was unbelievable. The midfield was unbelievable. The attack was unbelievable. We had brilliant wingers. We had backup wingers with Arsenal. Brignard came in and did a job wherever he was asked. And they were all leaders. And now you're looking at our team these days and going, geez, I wish we had 3 of those leaders, let alone 11 or 15 that we had at that time. And that's what they were. They motivated each other to and then obviously Steve Coppell did what he did, but on the pitch, when they needed, there's a couple of guys in there. The Leeds game, Stephen Hunt equalised in the 85th minute. They were asked a question, they find an answer, and they found that answer between themselves, and that's what the beauty of that team was.
And you mentioned it earlier that this all came from the top. So John Medeski has the overall kind of credit for what happened, because players come and go. And obviously all of these players who played in that season and the following season in the Premier League will forever be legends. Steve Coppell, Brian McDermott will forever be legends. But let's not forget the importance of Sir John Madejski. And I think for all of it, he's probably the one person you'd pick out as being key to Reading's success, really, in that season, the following season, and just the way he kind of built the club on solid foundations, did things in the inverted commas the right way. I think if you had to pick out one person, you'd probably say Sir John Madejski, wouldn't you, Johnny?
As a leader, without him, we wouldn't have done it. Without his vision or the way that getting the new stadium as it was back then, the things were done. It's called the Reading way, wasn't it? He said it was. We didn't spend. When we spent £1 million on League or Elite, everyone's going, what the heck? That's a bit crazy for us. And that was a big signing for us, wasn't it? Money wise, but it worked. He trusted Steve Coppell. He trusted. That's the thing. I think that in those days, he let the football guys do the football stuff. He'd do the finance stuff. He'd back what they were saying, because they had that trust between Steve Coppell, Brian McDermott, him. They were a team, so they believed in each other. Again, sadly, something that we don't seem to have a lot of at the minute, but that's what made it special. But he led it. He was the top man.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've talked about that. That's flown by, but obviously we had a lot of good stuff to talk about there, and just want to say thank you, Johnny, the voice of the 1871 podcast and now BBC Radio Berkshire as well. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to our three guests as well. Thank you to you for joining us. So that's it for tonight's episode, our recollections of the 106 season for our 106th episode. Just coming back to you now, John, just tell us about your book, what it's called and how people can buy it.
Okay, it's the sum of the parts, the evolution of the perfect team. It basically is recollections from fans who were there, an analysis of what happened and how and why, and also interviews with lots of people who were involved. I mean, Nick Hammond in particular, who's not really been mentioned recently.
Yeah.
Seems to have been airbrushed out of history, but he was so instrumental in everything. He gave so much of his time. It's available from Amazon and various bookshops around. They can always order it in if they haven't got it in stock. And it's really my love letter to Reading Football Club and these years. It covers the build up to the 106 season and the two Premier League seasons.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Phil. And thank you to Becky for joining us earlier as well. So that's it for tonight's episode. And a reminder that on Sunday, it's our special 40th anniversary episode, looking back on the proposed merger with Oxford United in 1983. So that's available anytime from 10 a.m. on Sunday. And talking of books, don't forget that we've got a prize to give away. We've got a copy of the Reading Between the Lines book, and that's about Reading's first season in the Premier League. So we're giving that away as a prize, and it's signed by Dave Kitson. And to be in with a chance of winning, just send us a direct message on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. So if you're contacting us on Facebook, just look out for our posts in any of the Reading Facebook groups, and then send me a direct message. Or you can send a direct message on Twitter or Instagram at 1871 podcast. And the question is, who was Reading's top scorer in the 106 season? So if you're interested in winning a copy of that book, Reading Between the Lines, about Reading's first season in the Premier League, and it's signed by Dave Kitson, then just tell us, get in touch and tell us who was Reading's top scorer in the 106 season. So listen, that's our recollections of the 106 season. Thank you to Johnny. Thank you to our guests. And we'll be back on Sunday talking about the 40th anniversary of the proposed merger with Oxford United.